Alex Chambers.
Kate Young.
Nice work.
So, Alex,
Uh-huh.
Carrie Hott likes to tinker. She takes apart electronics and tries to figure out how they work. She once did a residency at the UC Davis Center for Spaceflight Research.
Cool.
And a recent project of hers involves a pocket-sized, solar-powered internet server.
Wait, but she's an artist, right?
Yes. And her work got me wondering, what is it that artists do? How is their inquiry different from, or maybe even the same as, scientific or technological inquiry? So we touch on those questions in our conversation.
Very cool. And Tyler Lake found his honky-tonk roots at the Blockhouse.
And we take a tour of the Muliana exhibit at the Eskenazi Museum.
Is that all those beautiful, colorful crocheted sea creatures?
That's the one. And it's all coming up on Nice Work. I'm Kate Young. This is Nice Work.
My name is Carrie Hott, and I am an artist and a designer, and I'm a new assistant professor at IU Bloomington in the Eskenazi School.
Welcome, Carrie Hott, to Nice Work. I want to talk about your recent project, Our Shiver, but I would like to start with some of the work that came before that and kind of what led you into this kind of investigation. The first of your work that I encountered was a newsprint spread filled front and back with these clipped images of lamps and light bulbs arranged in this tidy grid, and it was called Lamps That Sense Us. So maybe we could start there, and can you talk about that project?
Sure. The Lamps That Sense Us, I call that newsprint piece that you have, I call it a circular. So I'll start with the format and what it's referencing, which is the grocery store or drugstore circulars that are still, around, even though a lot of our material is circulated digitally. There's still these kind of like low-cost newsprint, coupon, deal, advertising, leaflets, circulars that are filled with products. And they're very busy. So I chose to adapt and reference that format at a time when my research this was around, I would say all of this was really like at the top for me between 2017 and 2019. I had spent the decade prior researching artificial light and its history and how it was connected to the industrialization of labor and the way that artificial light changed the workday, the way that it changed according to which fuel source was being used. I was particularly focused on whale oil and artificial light. So I say all that because I had spent years really looking back, and then around that time became quite fascinated with this new development in lighting technology, where lamps were not only electric lamps, but could also have other components like a motion sensor or a camera. Perhaps something that's really commonly seen or understood is like a Ring camera that is part of a system, a home security system installed outside of a home. And you have a motion sensor that would set off a light, but perhaps there is also a camera in that. So that was really intriguing to me because I was seeing an evolution in lighting technology in my life. And a lot of what I was researching and looking at the form of was past lighting innovations and like changes in lamp technology and how it affected human behavior and like the way we work and the way we live and the way we understand the world. And because the way that I was understanding these new lighting innovations was through retail spaces, like through what was being sold, the way that I was understanding these was by looking at products. I then decided to create my own sort of like product circular to show, I think of it also as like a guide. Here are the lamps that sense us. Here's a matrix of all of these different devices that not only light, but they may also sense you or capture your image in in multiple ways, potentially, depending on what they have.
Yeah, when I saw it, I also read it as kind of a, so keep your eye out for these.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like you might not realize it, but that one has a camera in it. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, in my work, I will think of a form. My research just continues. It's like a river underneath my studio that I just keep rolling. I'm someone who makes things. I'm someone who designs things and thinks a lot about form and material. So I can't say where the circular, like if there was a moment that I can recall that seemed to be the solution, but I just thought, well, let's try this. And as I was making it, I realized, oh, this is not only about creating an index of as many of these types of lamps that I can find. This is also about provoking, like, here's a guide. Here's a, perhaps you might not recognize this as a lamp that has another function. Here's my, kind of overt, but also covert guide to these types of lamps.
Yeah, I love that when the act of making something causes you to realize new things about the I'm sure that happens a lot.
Yes, I would say that's a part of my practice that feels so essential. I'm not the artist or designer who plans everything 100% ahead of time and then fabricates it. I actually learn a lot about what I'm trying to figure out while I'm making it. And I think that's where I really am. I mean, the blurred line between artist and designer is like an endless conversation, but that's where I really feel that like my practice really is as an artist who makes work about design. Yeah, that process of figuring out while making is essential. It's frustrating. It's also like the best part often. So
yeah, that sense of discovery. And you have a recent or current exhibit in San Francisco called Years Ago.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Years Ago is at a gallery in San Francisco called Et al. Gallery. If you're familiar with San Francisco, and it's in a neighborhood called The Mission, wonderful art space. And this is a solo exhibition. When you walk into the room, it's an installation that has 2 videos on flat screen monitors. And then in the center of the room is what initially appears to be just a long table. It's about 25 feet long, 1 foot wide on one end and 2 feet wide on the other end. I think of that table as a giant hand of a clock. And it appears in the videos that are both on either side of the room. And those videos, one is a timer that looks like a giant iPhone, and the hand moves around the clock. And then in the other video, the giant clock hand is a table. It's a surface on which there are people, as shown by way of their hands on the table, trying to make things or figure things out. A view into the process of trying to look up different histories or ways of understanding time. So it's a really abstract exhibition about really abstract concepts like time and the way that time has been like industrialized or synchronized through technology, the way that it's shifted. The timer, the iPhone timer on one of the flat screens, for example, it's a 15-minute timer. And that came from, I was thinking about how 15 minutes has this whole new meaning in my life. It's more meaningful and is a more frequently referenced unit of time in my life now than it was even 10 years ago.
Really?
Just because of being a busy person. Also, I think that the way that I'm relating to my work and dividing up time and thinking about time blocking and trying to adapt and try different ways of managing time, it's something I both like use but also look at as a phenomenon of this time of like dwindling attention span, being pulled in a lot of different directions, multitasking, thinking about if I set a timer, then I'll be able to focus for 15 minutes and then I can not focus. I'm not saying I'm like outside of that reality. I'm inside of that reality, but I also find it really intriguing to look at and how that experience is different for me than it was 10 years ago when I didn't have a smartphone and I was not so online, as they say.
Yeah.
So I've described the installation, and the origin of this way of thinking for me began when I had a residency at a Center for Spaceflight Research at UC Davis back in California as part of a limited time residency program where 2 faculty there created a short-term program to put artists in research labs on campus. It's a very special, interesting program. I think a great model.
Yeah.
So I spent 4 months. I didn't live there. I just visited as frequently as I could. I could take a train from my home in the East Bay to Davis. It was about 2 hours each way, which that train ride became a very important part of the thinking process.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see how, especially if you're thinking about time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Thinking about synchronization of time that was enabled by the railroad and, the necessity of like having a shared time for arrival and departure and organizing the rail system. And that, that occurred to me, and that was interesting. But as I spent more time going back and forth, I was also reading a lot about satellite infrastructure. That was the subject I decided to use as my focus. And then thinking beyond railroad time into how satellite infrastructure then created a whole new level of synchronization of time. I went down a lot of rabbit holes, I would say, during that time. It's obviously a very big subject.
Yeah.
And it was such a wonderful experience. My time in the lab was it was full of really kind, interesting, smart people who were inviting me into their work and allowing me to think about the subjects that they were exploring and what it means to be iterating as a scientist, which in many ways looked a lot like an artist or a designer. But I also, when I would leave the lab and I would think about the overwhelming amount of infrastructure in space, it would start to become a little bit emotionally overwhelming for me. So I would say developing the exhibition came from a place of having a lot of time to think deeply about these subjects, but also trying to convey this feeling of kind of like existential overwhelm of trying to understand and grasp and grapple with subjects that are much larger than I am.
Oh, that sounds so interesting. Is the table that is in the art space, does it have anything on it?
It does. So the table surface itself is covered in stickers. And as I was working on the table here in Bloomington, I applied hundreds, maybe thousands of stickers I made, stickers I acquired, and then I would sand them down and peel them off. The stickers I chose were not random. There were a lot of stickers of dinosaurs and whales and stickers from planners and organizers from like office supply stores, things related to the earth or time. The ultimate process and result was peeling away stickers and revealing a worn surface, one that looks like it's aged, that it's been somewhere, that it's showing evidence of time and care and experiences.
And it's a wooden tabletop?
It's a wooden tabletop. It's painted black, and the stickers are mostly black and white.
Okay.
Yeah, most of the exhibition is actually black and white, which everything in my work has a reason, and it would take me, we'd be here for 3 hours if I explained every single one. But I'll just say the black and white comes from how photography works in space. They use black and white photography because there's less data. You can send a smaller file back, which I was like, oh, I know what that means.
Yes, exactly.
But on that sticker-worn tabletop are a lot of mugs, coffee mugs, which I started to acquire here in Bloomington, and then I also found some at salvage places in the Bay Area. And I would say that was going back to what we were saying earlier about having an idea, not really feeling exactly sure why that might be the form, but following that inclination. And as I collected mugs, I found many black and white mugs, many mugs that referenced places on Earth that I've been. Arizona, where I grew up, San Diego, where I used to visit a lot as a kid. I found a NASA mug, a Route 66 mug, a Have a Nice Day mug. And so I placed them around because when you put a mug on a table, it shows that someone has been there, and maybe they're done, maybe they're coming back, but it shows that something has happened, that time has passed. And mugs also are objects that we use during certain times of the day. They're markers of time, or they come from an experience as a souvenir. And then they themselves are very human. You know, they've got the handle for a hand. They're a very human object.
Yeah.
So having them as a repeating element throughout the exhibition, it became a kind of grounding point in a way for like bringing in this human process, the evidence of human process into the exhibition. I also propped up one of the television monitors on mugs. And this is the monitor that shows like an iPhone timer screen, very weird iPhone timer screen, but an iPhone timer screen video reference. And it's propped up on mugs because I was thinking about when you're like in your studio or in your kitchen or doing something and maybe you want to set a timer and watch a video, maybe you'll prop your phone up on a mug or something. So some of those decisions were made while installing, which is often how it goes for me.
Yeah.
It was the thing that I couldn't let go of, but cohered in the end.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until people were asking me about it and I started to actually speak that I realized, oh, actually, there are all these points that I think this is important. So that's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a need to trust yourself and your intuition even when you can't fully explain what something is about at first.
Yes. Yes. I was actually speaking with one of my colleagues about this practice of make now, think later. I do write a lot in my practice, but if I could write it all, I would just write it all.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, that trust is really important. But I just want to add that there's so many times that I don't make the right choice. People just happen to see when I think it might be. And so I think the challenge is making room for all those bad decisions.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So I would like to move to a recent project of yours called Our Shiver, which is a solar-powered server and website. I would love to hear you talk about the project and what it was and what you were exploring.
Sure. The project is, as you describe, a solar-powered server, meaning a small computer hosting a website. So all websites are hosted somewhere on a computer. So in this case, it's a small server that I built. And instead of running on grid energy plugged into the wall, it's powered through a solar panel, taking in solar power to a battery that then powers that server. The website that is hosted on the server is one that references its own infrastructure. So as soon as you load the website, you can see how much battery power there is, and you can see other metrics very specific to time and space, like where the server is located, its latitude and longitude, the time, the temperature, the weather. So immediately the project is about calling attention to the location in which this server is, which is currently in San Francisco as well. It also calls attention to the power by indicating how much there is and where it's coming from. So beyond that, the rest of the content of the website is in the form of essays written by 5 different artists and writers, writing from their perspective in relationship to subjects that connect to this project, whether it's labor in relationship to data center and server infrastructure, our experience with the internet. So it covers a broad scope through 5 different essays as a way to think more broadly about the implications of what is actually kind of a simple little computer just connected to a solar panel.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's more, but I'll pause because, of course, there's more.
Right. One of the things that happens because of the solar power is that it's not always available because there's not always enough sun, especially in a place like San Francisco, I would think.
It's true. This was all a commission by a nonprofit in San Francisco called The Lab, which is one of the oldest art nonprofits in San Francisco. And they are located also in this neighborhood called The Mission, which happens to be extremely sunny. So the Bay Area is full of microclimates where certain neighborhoods, it's foggy and overcast. But The Mission, which is farther inland, gets a lot of sun. And so the uptime, as we call it, the time that the website is up, has been really consistent for the last, it's been almost 10 months now that the project has been running. The only thing that's actually drained the battery has been a small light that I installed. That's there as a playful way to show when you walk into the space at the lab, you'll actually see the server right away. It's there in the entry. It's in a big clear plexi vitrine and in a display that looks like it's like a museum display.
Yeah.
But inside of that vitrine are electrical components and this very small credit card size computer called a Raspberry Pi, which is hosting the server. And so I guess back to your question, it's not always available. The idea is that it's not always available. Yeah. And what does that provoke? What possibility might that open up? This idea that our internet could not always be available. I think what I'm always curious about, wondering about, thinking about is what are we actually invited to learn more about in our devices, in our infrastructure, and what happens if we do know more about our systems and our infrastructure. I'm speaking generally, obviously, but going back to the lights and the lamps project, at that time I was thinking about smart devices and looking at the design of those devices and noting how smooth and closed they were. They felt, the things we live with can sometimes feel like these really closed systems and often are. So how does that small device, how does that parallel something really large like internet infrastructure? How does the sense of that being a closed system, how are those two things similar? And what can come of trying to take apart your home device and understand how it works? And what can come of trying to look at your internet infrastructure around you and understand how it works?
You're doing artistic investigations, which require a lot of scientific research and study, and you're working in the realms of science and technology, but you're doing so as an artist. What is the distinction between these two modes of inquiry, and also how are they similar?
I don't feel comfortable saying that I'm in the world of science. In particular, technology, yes. It's really because I'm like kind of an impatient tinkerer, and I always have been. And I taught myself how to code 20 years ago because I wanted a website. I wanted to know how to make a website. Now that's something that I teach. And it really comes from a place where I want to know I want to make something. And sometimes this really serves me. Sometimes it really does not serve me. Like sometimes I don't know what I'm doing and I get into the weeds and I have to call it and I move on. But the two parts of my practice that I think have stayed with me, where I began as an impatient tinkerer, are working with code, building websites, and working with and taking apart electronics and looking at how they work and trying to make new things out of them. When I decided to take on a solar-powered server. I had not done that before. I had come across and utilized guides from other artists who had created solar-powered servers. But it was really my background just tinkering and taking things apart that gave me the kind of like wherewithal to take this on. And it took me 3 years to get it right. You know, doing it in an extremely part-time way. So I guess I just want to say that my digging into anything that falls under the category of science and technology is very experimental and very like, you know, I do things like the wrong way on purpose as a way to learn them. And that goes back to kind of my driving interest in like what is accessible to a lot of us. Like, what does it mean to try to dig into taking apart, taking off the shell or outer case of a device that you were never intended to do that with?
Yeah, and maybe that doing it wrong on purpose and expecting and maybe at times seeking out failure is part of what separates it, makes it an artistic practice versus someone who's just trying to efficiently get it right.
That's it.
Yeah, as an artistic practice, what you're looking for in your tinkering is different than what some people who made that YouTube video of how to take this thing apart might be looking for.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. It's open-ended when I begin. I mean, when I started the process of building the server, I knew where I wanted to get, you know, the result that I was looking for. But in the periods, in the projects before that, there's so much trial and error. And going back to the installation in San Francisco years ago, it's the same instinct that drives me to go and find and acquire 30 coffee mugs. I just, let's try it. Let's see what happens when you put 30 coffee mugs together in a room with these other objects. What might that create? What narrative references? I would say that same drive exists when I have taken apart so many things, and it's the same instinct. What would happen if I took this apart? Is it really interesting to look at when it's taken apart? Are there parts and pieces that, well, surely they're actually part of really complex supply chains? Is there a way I can understand that in a different way if I take it apart and actually look at it and hold it? And I do that. I've gone to the point of taking things apart multiple times when I don't know what else to do in my work. You know, I stick with projects for years at a time, and I push through research for years at a time, and when it's finally in a public finished form, it's usually an installation. It's something that needs space and it needs support and it needs time. And so there are periods where I'm like tired and I want to perhaps pick up a new thread or start something new, but I don't know where to begin. I have all of these things I've learned. I have all of these things I've thought about, but what is the form? And how do I try to capture that ineffable thing that's not exactly words, it's not exactly statistics. And for me, that tinkering process and taking apart and pushing around and putting together is like crucial. It's gonna sound so corny when I say it, but it's like a poetic process. It's trying to set up the components of poetry in a way where I have the drive from within that comes from like a deep, investment in, subjects of like how infrastructure really mediates and shapes our experience. But what I'm trying to actually create is something that feels like weird and poetic and inviting and unusual.
Yeah, that it feels like that is one of the roles of art, is to invite people into these questions in a way that they might not otherwise feel invited in or curious about.
Totally. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. You said it. It really is. I don't claim, I think one of the things I struggle with in my work is that I really am exploring subjects that do have a lot of like right and wrong and a lot of technological information that's really dense and scientific, like referring to the spaceflight lab, like there's so much there that's just so rigorously scientific. Yeah. And so I do have to speak about these things because I've spent time around them. I research them, but I'm not interested in acquiring that expertise at all. I am more interested in figuring out a way to enable an experience for others that pulls in the questions that I'm grappling with in a way that I haven't seen before.
That was artist and designer Carrie Hott. She's an assistant professor at the Eskenazi School of Art, Architecture, and Design at Indiana University. Find links to her work on our website, ipm.org/nicework.
This is Nice Work, and I'm Tyler Lake. And I tell you what, as a general rule, I like a place that's under another place. And even more so if the place above is also a great spot. The Blockhouse Bar is one of those places. And it's surrounded by great spots. It shares a wall with the Atlas Ballroom, and it's tucked all tidy-like just under the back door. I was there recently to catch something they do on Tuesday nights.
Welcome to the Honky Tonk Tuesdays! We're glad you're here. We'll kick it off.
The thing about the Blockhouse is you kind of need to know where it is, because if you try to Google it...
The address usually takes you to the Atlas Ballroom, which is also in this building, right on the front of the building. So when I tell artists how to get here, I say access from the 4th Street alleyway in between the parking garage and the Chinese restaurant across from WFHB. Or if you're familiar with the back door, it's just underneath the back door. So if you go into the alleyway where you would normally go to the back door, just keep walking a little bit past the fence and you'll see a door that you're not supposed to go into, or at least it looks like, but please come in the door. That's how I always explain it.
That's Kaiya Grundmann. She's the booking manager for the Blockhouse, and she gives out a lot of directions because the Blockhouse books a lot of touring artists. And they have a lot of regulars, too. That's performers and patrons, and the line sometimes gets pretty fuzzy. Once you go through that door that Kaiya mentioned, you see a small bar sectioned off from a large performance space by a few floating walls.
Primarily, it is a music venue that showcases local musicians and like smaller or up-and-coming touring musicians. We've had a lot of people come through that kind of the next time around on their tour are a little bit too big for our britches. So yeah, kind of a lift-off space for artists.
Could you give me an example of a few of those acts that have been here that probably you couldn't get in here now?
Sure. Mitski is a big one. Dougie Poole has played here. Yeah, actually, Friendship that just played again last Friday, played here like 10 years back, and they're kind of up and coming now too. Teeth. Yeah, there's kind of quite a few of them. We'd prioritize certainly like the Room being a nice place to see a show, like intimate setting, but with a lot of priority like towards sound design, and it's intimate but feels professional.
When did this space open?
So it actually started as kind of a studio recording space back in 2014, and then we started throwing shows kind of informally, very DIY, I think in like 2015, 2016, and then we've fully transformed into a venue with a proper bar in it in 2017, I believe.
One of my favorite things about the Blockhouse is they're not afraid to experiment.
We try to kind of showcase as much local art as we can. So we have salsa nights with a 10-piece salsa band once a month, and international music come through. We have a lot of like indie bands. I mean, it's kind of all over the map. We also do comedy shows and like poetry showcases and things like that as well. So yeah, it's a very mixed bag.
So let's talk a little bit about some of those, like your recurring events that people can really plan on them and make it part of their routines.
Yeah, so every week our most dependable is Honky Tonk Tuesday.
I've got a tiger by the tail,
country classics and rock and roll classics played by our house band, which is kind of a ragtag crew of local musicians that you can see in many other bands around town. Singers rotate through in honky-tonk style. Very fun. It's only $7. Prior to that, every Tuesday we have an open mic with 10 slots where people can come in and kind of get up on stage and play a couple of their tunes. Starts at 6:30 and goes until 8:30 right before tonk.
Are there any other sort of either semi-recurring things that people can kind of just set their watch by?
Every first and third Wednesday, we have improv and jazz. The first Friday of every month is when we have the salsa night. And then now we also are having a comedy show and sell, and that's fun. Dave Walter, who runs Vulture Video, is involved in that, and also karaoke around town everywhere. And also some people from Fabuloso, improv comedy, which the Busman's Holiday Boys are involved in, put that together. And it's fun. They bring in a bunch of different comics and weird objects that Dave Walter sources, and they kind of make up what they are and make up a value for them and quote unquote auction them off. So it's kind of a fun concept.
I have not made it to one. I love the whole crew, and I mean to, because it seems like a lot of fun. I don't think I knew that it was Dave pulling from his weird world of curiosities.
Yeah, me neither. Honestly, I thought it was just kind of random objects found amongst them, but I came to realize last time that they did this that he finds weird drop shipped kind of objects and pulls them from China. So it's very on brand.
So besides, kind of raking in cash, what are you guys trying to achieve with the Blockhouse?
Really, our priority, we're not raking in a lot of cash. Our priority is kind of just creating a community space where people can feel comfortable to express themselves and hear other people's expression of art in this town, because there's a lot of art in this town. There's a lot of music in this town. And so, having a place where people can always count on coming down and seeing a good show and hearing something they may have never heard before, or finding pockets of community that they might not have known existed, kind of generally creating a space where people feel connected with what this community has to offer, and finding kind of a space for that is harbors expression. Last summer, we put on the inaugural Bloomerang Festival, which the concept of is kind of if you're a townie, Bloomerang is how we refer to people who grew up here, left, and came back, and I'm one of those. I went to Colorado for 5 years and returned. And this place kind of has that magnetic kind of energy. So the concept of Bloomerang is showcasing artists who either still live here or started here or in Indiana, kind of regionally, and took off and are coming back to play their music for their, for their roots, their root community. So last year we had something like 20 bands coming as a 2-day festival between us and the back door. I had Diane Coffey, Damien, a lot of people who are really close to this community musically. That was really meaningful to me to see how many people came out to appreciate what can be built here and what has been built here.
Do you intend on doing it again?
Yes, we're in the works of putting it together again this year now. The idea for it is to hopefully make it bigger every year and connect with more local businesses and nonprofits and stuff to bring in more variety. And I mean, we're very connected to it backdoor in terms of customer base and also friends with them. And it's convenient because we are in the same building. So it's easy for us to work together and pool our resources to make it happen. Like last year, Cicada Cinema was involved and put on the documentary for Swamp Dog, which was sponsored in part by Secretly Group. So kind of having a little bit more multimedia, I think, is a goal for this year as well. We are seen as a venue, and so people tend to only come when they see an artist that they want to hear playing. And what I would just recommend is, even if you don't know what's going on, come downstairs, because there's probably something interesting that you may not realize that you'll like. So like, trust our curation. Yeah, there's a lot to see that people miss out on because it's not just an artist that they already know. So yeah, it'd be nice to just kind of have more of a built-in crowd here from people trusting that what we have going on is going to be a good time.
That was Kaiya Grundmann at the Blockhouse Bar, and they generally have something on most nights. And they have a swell little events calendar right on their homepage at blockhousebar.com.
This old smoke-filled bar is something I'm not used to. But I gave up my home to see you satisfied.
This is Nice Work. I'm Tyler Lake.
To let you know where I'll be living. It's not much, but I feel welcome here inside. And I've got swinging doors, a jukebox, and a bar stool. My new home has the flashing neon sign. Stop by and see me.
All right, so describe this one for me, this whole situation for me, Kate.
So there's all these small yellow fabric fish. They're a few shades of yellow and kind of a yellow-orange, all the same size for the most part, and just really like filling the air. And when you walk through and just create like slight breezes, they're so lightweight that they kind of move around a little bit and really give that feeling of moving through water, which I love. I'm really taking in the atmospheric elements, the way that this kind of cloud of tiny yellow fish hanging from the ceiling, and then these bleached jellies coming also from the ceiling, and it just has a real, like I'm really sensing how it fills in.
It's not just pieces of artwork. It's
Right,
absolutely fully
right. They're not
exhibit-wide.
just isolated pieces to walk around and investigate. There's an atmosphere.
Have you ever seen a fiber work exhibition at this scale?
No, I don't think so at this
I
scale.
don't
So
think I
why
ever
don't you describe some of these wall pieces that we
All right.
see kind of throughout the exhibit? The first few are extremely colorful.
Yeah. And what are they made out of? Like, you're so much more versed on like fiber art. What are the materials?
Okay,
and
well,
what is the...
most of this I would say is crochet.
Uh-huh.
I'm seeing some that are knitted, like this one's knitted. You can tell by the kind of V shape. And then these don't have that V shape. They have a different kind of, I don't know
And
what
the
you
V shape comes
describe
from
it.
like the process of how you knit. It ends
Yeah,
up giving you those
knitting
kind of
and
shapes.
purling creates that V shape. And so anything that has that on it, like those little dark purple
Uh-huh.
kind of, but there's like these ruffles and there's these sea anemone type things. These to me look like sea urchins that are closed up.
Uh-huh.
You know how they close up and then all those little pebbles get around the edge? That's what that looks like to me.
These to me look like a little bit of a Mogus, his like imaginary characters that are like kind of like actual sea creatures but aren't, where he's recreating these underwater scapes, but it's all imaginative. So the fidelity is not necessary really, I don't think.
Yeah, but there is also some fidelity here and
Yeah,
there.
for
And,
sure.
and some of the coral structures, like these bright pink branches that are coming out, a lot of those are wire structures underneath.
right.
And so they can actually manipulate those and play with them.
Which means anytime one of these pieces move to another location, it's going to be slightly different just by the nature of the jostling at the very least.
Exactly, yeah. And then on the floor, there's also these really elaborate pieces, something that looks like stone maybe, and then all kinds of creatures. There's even a lobster.
The things that look like they're made of stone look to me like they're made out of mostly gray and white and beige hacky sacks of all various sizes.
Yep,
like hundreds
that's a really
of hacky
good
sacks.
description of them. Yep.
So just the way that like it's not a stone, it is a bunch of little things. Nothing is like singular.
Yeah.
Everything feels like it's stitched together from a lot of human labor.
Yes, and these are all made from what looks to me to be soft yarn.
And everything in this corner of the exhibit is really bright and really vivid and really colorful and reflects our notions of the bottom of the ocean floor as being this bright, lively place.
Yeah.
But there's a point to this whole thing, right?
Right, because then as you turn, you come across this area where all of the forms, some of them look familiar in their shapes and textures, but they're all kind of a bleached white gray color. There's a lot of the jelly, what we used to call jellyfish, and I know that they're not fish, but jellies, they're sometimes called. There may be some other term for them. And one of the things that you might not notice at first, but if you get close and really examine them, the materiality is different. This is not made of fuzzy, soft yarn. These are made from strips of white plastic. And they're made from plastic bags from like takeout food.
Which I guess, the story was that during COVID when he was getting a lot of takeout food, and I think like we all were, feeling pretty guilty about the amount of plastic bags that pile up when you do a lot of takeout food. It looks like the colorful side, except for everything's bleached white, and it's sort of taken the idea of that under too warm of conditions, coral bleaches white. And everything, even the things on the seafloor that wouldn't be white are now.
Yeah, and I didn't know this until hearing about it from the curator, but when coral is bleached white, it's not dead. It can be revived. It's signaling a state of distress.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, yeah.
There's also in this part these whalebone structures. So there's like a vertebrae and ribs and head and kind of fin shapes, which I just never thought of what a whale skeleton would even look like.
And it's evocative of a whale fall. And if you've ever seen or read about a whale fall, it feeds the environment. Lots of thousands of creatures come and feed. But this doesn't feel like an event that helps nurture an environment. This feels more catastrophic than that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways that you could interpret this. And again, there is some kind of realism in this, and then there's some that's not.
Fantasy of some sort.
Yeah, in terms of what kinds of creatures might be benefiting from a whale fall. These may not match up, but it's really more about symbolic and poetic and different ways of thinking about this undersea life.
So then after we go through all the white coral, we get to, it's again, all the same elements. It's really color is the big distinction here, and material, I suppose, for some of it. But what are we looking at here?
Similar wall pieces and some on the floor that have a lot of those same shapes and forms that we've been seeing.
It feels dead.
Yeah, it's all the same kind of stuff, but it's dark and gray. This is the section that's called Death and Decay. And so it's really showing that it's gone beyond the bleaching and into the death of these coral reefs.
And yet it's still imaginative and fascinating and interesting.
Yeah, there's a whole collection of the mogus hanging from the ceiling in this part towards the end of the exhibit. They're all black with white, one single eye. They're smaller. And there's just a whole collection of them. They're like the school of fish, they're just a whole bunch of them. And they have these little white horn or arm things coming out.
I couldn't decide which either,
They're very lively to me. They're engaging.
The idea of some of what this is doing, besides being beautiful and really interesting, is kind of giving you another way of looking at environmental devastation. How do you feel it does that?
I think because of all of the playfulness that you see throughout this exhibit, it really invites you in to engage with it. And it's not just all doom and gloom. Just the craft alone is inspiring and just kind of fills you with wonder to just like, how did they do this?
Yeah.
Just
Even as it can kind of fill you with a bit of dread.
yeah, exactly. And I think that that kind of approach can be really effective to draw people in with beauty and then remind them of the seriousness of the situation and of
The loss.
the precarity of the world's coral reefs.
Muliana, Vital Ecosystems, is on display now through June 28th at the Sidney and Lois Eskenazi Museum of Art on the IU Bloomington campus.
They've got events planned alongside the exhibit, including a couple of performances. You can find out more at artmuseum.indiana.edu. You've been listening to Nice Work, a production of WFIU, WTIU, and Indiana Public Media. Find us at ipm.org.
This episode was produced and edited by Kate Young. We get production help from Danny William, Holly Wilkerson, Carl Templeton, Leo Pies, Jillian Blackburn, and Jonah Ballard.
Our theme music was composed and performed by Alan Davis. Additional music from Universal Production Music. The executive producer is Eric Bolstridge. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Nice work, Kate.
Nice work, Alex.